Yu Yu Hakusho is a strategy RPG that was developed primarily for a Western audience, available on the Game Boy Advance, which makes it odd as far as anime licensed games go, and it's a fairly watered down version of what you might expect from a normal strategy RPG. That doesn't make it bad though, and there are two major things that distinguish it. First, there's the initiative system. Instead of normal turn-based tactical combat, the turn order is decided by which moves you use. If one of the characters uses a really powerful move, that takes up more of their initiative and makes them wait longer. If they just stand around and wait, it uses less of their initiative and they're more likely to go sooner. Each move requires a different amount of initiative, and you can check the specifics at any time, but you'll quickly get a feel for which moves put you out longer. The game's difficulty curve and character progression eases you into this, so you quickly learn not to leave yourself too vulnerable by using your strongest moves in the middle of a big pack of enemies. The other big thing distinguishing this game is that instead of character roles being defined by classes, they're instead defined by the license. Being more familiar with the license can actually give you a severe tactical advantage because the character progression is tied directly to how the characters work in the licensed material. For example, if you're familiar with Yu Yu Hakusho, you may know Hiei is incredibly fast, and his character progression is tailored toward his movement speed and some incredibly damaging moves that leave him at a disadvantage for a short period. Likewise, if you were to say, expect Kuwabara to get a large variety of ranged moves and be hopping around the map at light speed, you would be incredibly disappointed. His moves are often reckless and damaging, but he's incredibly slow. It's refreshing to have a strategy RPG where you get a severe tactical advantage just for being familiar with the source material and how the characters and their movesets work. The characters' moves also play out reasonably the same way you'd expect them to if you're familiar with the source material, and it's nice to see them function in a 3D space in a way that makes sense. And the game has other nuances going for it outside of its licensed-based advantages and initiative system. There's a simple set of rules that govern everything, and manipulating them is key to victory. There's a taunting system which draws all enemy attention to a single character and forces them to ignore all your other playable characters, which can set up some pretty brutal bottlenecks that you can use to annihilate your enemies. Though you still have to keep in mind exactly how much damage your human shield can take, and this may change depending on which stats the character is best suited for. For example, early on in the game I often used Kuwabara to taunt because he could take damage the best, but later in the game it became Yusuke, as Yusuke has greater capacity for HP growth than any of the other characters. The game also features an incredibly simplified version of locational damage that functions for both you and the enemy characters. If you were to attack someone from the front, they would take the least damage, and if you were to attack them from behind, they would take the most damage, with side attacks dealing a moderate amount. This works well with the overall enemy types and enemy AI. After you first encounter an enemy type, you'll quickly become associated with their capabilities, and that will make them easy to manipulate, getting them into the exact positions you want them to be, so that way they are incapable of striking you from behind, but you can do so to them quite easily. It's not as though you can just go in guns blazing, though, after you figure out how the enemies work. Another mechanic that functions the same for both you and the enemy characters is spirit energy. Nearly every move available in the game uses spirit energy, and you need to carefully conserve it like you would ammunition. So in addition to carefully choosing which moves to use based on how much initiative they require, there is how much spirit energy they require to also consider. This goes for your enemies as well, and you can easily bait some of your stronger enemies to running out of spirit energy, putting them on the defensive. You and your enemy are also capable of both regenerating health and spirit energy, though this uses a lot of initiative, and it will be a while before you can move again if you decide to do this. Fortunately, you can provide cover fire or simply taunt to take an enemy's attention away from a character who's currently healing. Hopefully you're getting the idea that although this is an incredibly simplified strategy RPG that works on a small scale, there's still a lot of opportunities for tactical thinking. The game isn't shy about trying to add variety either, with a bunch of different mission types, although admittedly it does fall back on destroy all enemies a bit too frequently for my tastes. The most variety comes in the form of character progression. As your characters unlock new moves, it changes how you use them significantly. I already brought up an example earlier with Yusuke, but there's an enjoyable sense of progression in seeing each character slowly come into their roles. That's not to say there aren't criticisms to be had about Yu Yu Hakusho tournament tactics, though. Without the license-based tactics and enjoyable character progression, it would be a little bit difficult to recommend Yu Yu Hakusho, as a sense of fatigue does start to settle in relatively quickly. Some battles can take up to 30 minutes, and the enemy types are simple, which makes their AI easy to manipulate, thankfully, but you also get the feeling that although the enemies' looks are changing, the enemies themselves aren't changing all that much. It's clearly a game that was meant to be played around one mission at a time because it does clock in at over 10 hours in total length, and if you play it all in one sitting, you're probably going to hate yourself. But it's still a game where the license enhances the game design instead of hinders it, and I think for that Yu Yu Hakusho is kind of remarkable, especially since it was handled by an American studio and designed primarily for an American audience.